Welcome, everyone. I want to welcome you to our Timely Topics presentation on improving resident quality of life in cities and towns, featuring the North Carolina League of Municipalities Director of Business Development, Jennifer Cohen. I'm Cheryl Keaton, co-chair of the Timely Topics Committee. Cheryl Tung, president of the League of Women Voters of Wake County, who usually welcomes everyone, is serving as a panelist at the City of Raleigh Virtual Town Hall on redistricting this evening. Here is the meeting link if you would like to tune in to the virtual town hall after this program. We have several activities and events coming up that may interest you. League committees are busy sharing and discussing and advocating, and you can see some of their activities at our online calendar at lwvwake.org website. If you're a member, upcoming events are also listed in the League's newsletter. Our next Timely Topics is November 18th. It is sponsored by the League's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. The topic is an introduction to the TRHT framework, a holistic approach to racial equity. I hope you'll join us. The program will be a little bit later than today's program. It will start at 6:30. Before we begin, I want everyone to know we record Timely Topics and post the recording within a few days on the LWV Wake YouTube channel so that you can share the event with friends and colleagues who may not have seen it or been able to attend. We're using the Zoom platform, and except for the presenter and the moderator, everyone should be muted during the program. Please turn off your video when the presentation begins. To ask questions of the presenter, please use the chat feature. If you type a Q or the word question at the beginning of your question, this will help the moderator recognize to submit your questions. Heather Dennis, our Timely Topics Committee co-chair and behind the scenes technical operator, will monitor the questions submitted and will serve as our moderator for the Q&A segment. At the end of the presentation, the speaker will be asked your questions. We'll try to get to as many of your questions as we can. So please don't wait until the end of the presentation to submit your questions. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker. Jennifer Cohen is the Director of Business Development with the North Carolina League of Municipalities. She is responsible for leading all strategic development and member service functions and initiatives. Prior to joining the League, she taught high school economics and government, served as the CEO and chief lobbyist for the Insurance Federation, and was chief of staff to the North Carolina State Treasurer. Before moving to North Carolina in 2005, Jennifer practiced law in New York and California. She lives in Raleigh and has two grown children who reside in Dallas and San Francisco. Let's welcome Jennifer Cohen.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Cheryl Tung, for finding me and asking me to present to you all tonight. And thank you to Heather for all the technical backup that you gave me. I'm really delighted to be here this evening. You know, it's interesting. You have a league that was founded in 1920 that does nonpartisan political work to empower voters, and I'm with a league that was founded in 1908 that does nonpartisan work to empower our cities and towns in North Carolina. So I think that there are some nice synergies there, and I'm hoping that the information I bring to you today will be useful. I know that we want to talk about improving resident quality of life in cities and towns, and probably, you know, one of the most impactful ways you can do that is through your elected leaders, your local elected leaders. That's really where the rubber hits the road. The people that are there at your council meetings and your board meetings, or your aldermen that you're running into at the grocery store and in church and at the soccer field, and the people that are making those day-to-day localized decisions. A great example is what just happened as we worked through the COVID pandemic. The federal government took the position that this wasn't going to be a federally mandated solution. It was going to get, you know, pushed down with some funding to the states, but then localities were really going to be making a lot of decisions. And there was, you know, a variety of decisions across North Carolina, across the country, and how cities and towns handled and responded to the pandemic. And I can tell you it was a very, very difficult year for local elected officials. There was a terrific amount of stress and uncertainty. And I think most of them should be very proud of the job that they did trying to keep their communities safe. So just an example of how critical local governance can be. It's yes, it's important to fill our potholes, and it's important to bring businesses um, to our cities and towns. But sometimes there are roles and responsibilities that we don't foresee, and we have to rise to the challenge. And that's one way that the North Carolina League of Municipalities can assist. So here's a little bit about what we do. Let's see if I can get this going here. Okay, I don't know why oh, there we go. I'm just a little slow here. So what are we? An association of 538 of North Carolina's cities and towns. As I mentioned, organization was started in 1908 as the Carolina Municipal League. There were 22 cities that came together, and as I'm sure you can imagine, realized that they would have a lot more political clout together than they would alone. So they formed this league, as did almost every other state formed these types of political advocacy leagues to be able to have influence in their state legislatures. But then these leagues evolved to be able to provide other programs and services aside from advocacy. So advocacy is still, clearly a core mission and something we spend a lot of time doing. But we also do a lot of other things. We say that we are a one-stop shop for all municipal cities and towns, and we are led by cities and towns. And we try to be a unified voice for the cities and towns up at the state level. In fact, once a year, we come together and we vote on the legislative agenda and on the topics that the league is going to pursue on behalf of the cities and towns, and everyone has to come to agreement on that. So working together, this is what we strive to do. We, in about 2015, we engaged the UNC School of Government to help us come up with a strategic plan. And one of the first things that we needed to discuss was, what are our values? What are we driven by? And this is what we came up with. We are driven by self-service, self-determination, inclusiveness, collaboration, and responsiveness. And when I say us, I mean the cities and towns, because the league is 538 cities and towns. So we want cities to be able to determine their own path. We don't want the state legislature coming in there and mandating what Hickory can do versus what Edenton can do versus what Raleigh could do, or Apex or Carver or Wake Forest. We try to maintain self-determination for those cities and towns. We want our cities and towns to feel inclusive. These should be hometowns. This is where we live and work and create families. We know that we should focus on collaboration, working with our private partners in our cities and towns as well as our counties. And we clearly want to be responsive to our constituents. We are governed by a 35-member board of directors. They come from throughout the state. There's regional diversification. We have 12 districts, and we also have, in addition to elected leaders that are on our staff, we have municipal staff. So for instance, we have a manager representative, we have a city attorney representative, we have a town clerk representative. So we're really trying to get that holistic voice of local government sitting around the table, discussing the issues that are impactful and emerging for our cities and towns. Part of the strategic plan that we came up with was to identify what are the challenges that cities and towns in North Carolina are facing. What is it going to take to be a really effective town in 2030, to really meet the needs of your residents, to be the best that you can be? And this, that's going to be a different thing. If you live in Charlotte, it's going to feel totally different than if you live in Charlotte, right? But holistically, are there some challenges everybody is going to face? And I highlighted a couple that I think were the most impactful. One thing that people don't understand is that citizens don't understand the roles and responsibilities of municipalities, and they expect more for less, and therefore you run into an issue with taxes. And I think that that resonates with people. We kind of just expect things to happen and we don't realize that there has to be funding for it. But there's only one place. And when I taught government, I used to tell this to my students. You know, we don't sell T-shirts. Government doesn't sell. That's not how we make money, right? Unfortunately, we have to tax people or we have to spend less, and that's the only way that you can increase your coffers, if you will, to be able to provide services. So this is really a challenge for cities and towns. This next one, I think, should hit home with all of you, given the redistricting conversations, right? Patterns of population growth are changing. They are changing. So we know a bunch of people are moving into North Carolina. We read about that all the time. We probably see it in our communities. And there's this huge growth in urban areas. And I want to focus on this. There is a decline in some rural areas, but especially in Wake County, you can see the patterns of population. Actually, it's almost like concentric circles, right? It's going out and out and out and out. And you look at how much someplace like, Clayton is growing. We know Apex has gone through the roof. So people are moving a little bit farther out. So things that used to be considered rural really aren't as rural anymore. But there certainly is this divide, and this divide mainly between richer and poor communities, but they're not necessarily large and small. And I think the definition of urban is changing somewhat. Um, Here are a couple more. Um, so the future of some of these rural and smaller communities are really having challenging economic circumstances. It's hard to maintain viability for some of them. And that's a tough thing because there's a lot of history and there's a lot of importance in some of our smallest and most rural communities. And that's hard for the residents there, right? Because maybe you have older residents that have lived there their whole lives, and their quality of life is diminishing as there become fewer and fewer opportunities within those communities. Um, the places of interlocal working relationships, so county and cities, right? Working together. In some places, cities don't have services, they rely on the counties. So for your fire, your police, your first responders, they're having to share that. And those are becoming strained, or sometimes because there isn't enough money to even support those services, they're moving farther and farther out, which is impacting the quality of life of residents in some of our, um, you know, more rural, more rural cities and towns. And then throughout our state, because we think we have some big cities here, right? But the majority of the cities and towns in North Carolina are less than 5,000 in population. So you look at 538 cities and towns, the vast, vast, vast majority have under 5,000 people, and some of them have far less than that. So there are interests and needs that are really underrepresented or actually unrepresented, and these continue to present challenges for the people that live in those cities and towns. So what do we do? What does the League of Municipalities do? And again, every state except Hawaii has a League of Municipalities, or they'll call it a League of Cities, and they all essentially do the same thing. And although I think we do a little bit more than perhaps some other state leagues, we serve as the full service extension of local government. So if a city and town can't provide it, then the league will help them provide it. And I'm going to give you some examples of that in a moment. We promote good local government. We want the elected leaders, the mayors, the council members, the aldermen, we want them to be as good at their job as they possibly can. We want them to be excited about running. We want them to campaign well. We want them to learn how to collaborate. We want them to learn how to stay out of trouble. We want them to learn how to what their true roles and responsibilities are. I cannot tell you the number of newly elected officials, local elected officials on, the Wrightsville Beach Board of Aldermen. That's not the actual example of what this person said, but I have had people say to me, "I'm so excited I got elected. Now I can work on the schools." you can't work on the schools if you're simply elected to the Board of Aldermen of Wrightsville Beach. That's not going to happen. So you need to understand what your roles and responsibilities are and how you can leverage that responsibility to make your hometown the best it can be for its citizens. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we try to influence state and federal policy that affect municipalities. So like you try to influence public policy. We try to do the same, but we do it on behalf of the cities and towns. So I mentioned some things that we do. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these particular slides, but we actually have 3 insurance pools, and we provide insurance to city and town employees. So just as you have insurance, through your work, or maybe through Medicare or something like that, we provide insurance to the state. I mean, to the city employees. So we have a health insurance pool, a workers' compensation insurance pool, and a property casualty insurance pool. We do risk management. So we'll go into a city or town and say, hey, you're going to have a big flood problem here. Or you know what, your police force needs a little bit of training because we can see that you're having too many car accidents. So let's go in and do some safe driver training here. Or, that utility structure looks like it's about to be a problem. Or you've got that abandoned building, or that pool at the rec center that you don't use anymore. That's a safety hazard. So we go in and try to make these cities and towns as safe as they can be for the residents. We also do a lot of consultation. We will go into to a town and we will run a council retreat for them that has team building and leadership training, and they learn how to collaborate. They learn how to let every voice in the room be heard, because I think that many people, they win their election, they've been campaigning, and then they have to make the shift to governing. And wow, that's a little bit different, because you need to get along with the other 5 or 7 or 9 people in the room if you're going to push your agenda forward. So we do a lot of that. We'll work with a town to set their own strategic goals. And we will engage with staff, we will engage with citizens, we will engage with different task forces to try to set that strategic vision for that particular town. We can help with financial and operational planning if they're having problems with their books. We can do economic development training. I was just in Goldsboro, and I can't believe what has happened in that town, how it has changed and grown, and it has these cool boutiques and breweries and a beautiful median and walking space right through the center of town, and historic buildings that have been preserved. It's really amazing, and their demographic has changed a lot because of that, and the town is benefiting economically. And we can also do IT assessments. I mentioned early on that we've spent a lot of time in training. We just started this last year, and we've created a program called Advancing Municipal Leaders. We host webinars, and we're creating on-demand modules because, as you know, a lot of these elected leaders have other jobs. They are essentially volunteer public servants in their cities and towns. So, they need the flexibility of learning when they have the time. So we have this platform. We also have an initiative called Leverage NC, which is focused strictly on economic development, doing education about how to make your town attractive to others. We'll talk about affordable housing. We'll talk about recruitment, a number of different issues. And we actually have a partnership with Eastern Carolina University on cultivating entrepreneurs and getting entrepreneurs that graduate from ECU interested in moving to cities and towns to launch their businesses or continue their businesses. Again, something that is going to improve resident quality of life, bringing more and more business, sustainable businesses that can survive pandemics with an online presence, businesses that really can find a home among the demographics in particular cities and towns. And then we just launched in the last few months, our direct program, which stands for Diversity, Inclusion, and Racial Equity for Cities and Towns. And we take a little bit different approach to our diversity, inclusion, and racial equity training. It is completely data-based. It is historical. What we do is we go through the history of racial inequities in North Carolina, how it got there, why it got there. We talk about redlining, we talk about Jim Crow, and then we give city employees or city officials, whoever goes through it, the tools to go back to their city and town and say, what do I have here that isn't, that isn't leveling the playing field? Do I have some codes or ordinances on the books that, even though they're not enforced, they are discriminatory, and it just feels bad to our residents to have these codes or ordinances on the books? What does my business district look like? What is my makeup of business owners, white to black or Latino or whatever? What is my demographic mix here, and why, and what can we do about it? Are my utilities being distributed fairly and equitably, and why? So it gives them tools to actually look at their cities and towns to create what we call municipal equity, which then allows the residents of these towns to all feel like they have a voice, that every voice is heard, and everyone feels that this town is their home, and that they have an equal amount of respect and, again, voice at that local level. So we just launched that. We have a lot of research that we do, and try to push that down to cities and towns. And this is the last thing that we've just gotten involved with is the American Rescue Plan. Some of you may be aware of the amount of money that was allocated by the federal government to give some relief to cities and towns, across the United States. Obviously, this is not unique to North Carolina, but all the towns in North Carolina are getting some of them very substantial funds from the American Rescue Plan, and we are helping guide those decisions on how to spend those dollars, because there are a lot of restrictions. It's similar to getting a federal grant in the audit team that has to come after you take the money, and there are some real stringent guidelines as to what you can spend it on. So there is this money available, and it is really going to benefit communities. There are communities there that were putting money aside to build a water tower. They don't have to do that now, because utility infrastructure, water, sewer is included in this money. So they're going to use their ARP funds to build their new water tower, and then they can take those funds that were supposed to go to the water tower and push them somewhere else. So I think that you're going to see in the next few years some real improvement in infrastructure faster than you would have seen it before. And again, that directly correlates to better quality of life. So we are really caught up in this. We are talking about it all the time. We are going throughout the state, having regional discussions, sitting down with elected officials, and we're going to continue to do this to help these to help these cities and towns get their funds, and then to help them spend it within the guidelines. And then hopefully we will be able to bring on some additional staff to help them do the auditing and further documentation of it. But this is a pretty exciting thing for North Carolina. And then the last thing, which is actually the first thing that we started off doing, was advocacy. Coming together back in 1908 to have some advocacy strength to be able to influence legislators in a more robust way. And we do this all the time now. We have really talented lobbyists that go down to Jones Street every day and have these discussions to make sure that cities and towns can have that self-determination that they so rightfully deserve, because they know their constituents, they know their residents much better than the state level does. Okay, redistricting. I know this is near and dear to your hearts, probably, and I know you've been working on it, and I know Cheryl's going to be on a panel about this, so I wanted to just include a couple of slides on it. I hope it's not too redundant, but as you all know, there were big complications in the census. There was a delay, and that was going to lead to probably some pretty inequitable voting. And really, I mean, let's just say it was going to be unconstitutional, because there wasn't going to be one person, one vote out there. So we lobbied for the solution, which was to move some elections to 2022 and allow sufficient time for redistricting. Now, we don't get involved in the actual redistricting, but we wanted the cities and towns to have that time to be able to meet their constitutional requirements. And there were 42 cities that were impacted by that. And this was the the Senate bill that allowed this to happen, Senate Bill 722. So we moved some of these elections forward. We made Raleigh an even numbered year, and we were going to allow some redistricting of county election districts as well. Oops, I stopped again. There we go. So Raleigh municipal elections are going to be in even numbered years going forward. So that's going to be exciting, starting in 2022. Cary, I just picked some Wake County towns here. Cary will have their election March 8th. It was one of the 42 that are moved, and then they'll have their runoff if it's necessary. And then the other important aspect was for 2022, the law removes a prohibition on voter registration between the first and second primaries. And so voters who register after the date of the first primary can go ahead and vote in the second primary. And the only challenge is voters cannot change their party affiliation. So that was the last part of that bill. So that's a lot about the league in a short amount of time. But I certainly wanted to be able to hear from you and maybe, respond to things that are of particular interest to any of you that have joined us this evening. So with that, I'll turn it over to Heather and see if there's anything in the chat that people would like to discuss.
There is tons in the chat. So I am kind of sneaking back up here to the beginning. So we can kind of take them in order. And there are a few that seem interrelated. So if I'm combining them, I hope that's all right. The first comes to us from Rebecca, and her question is, how do we get elected leaders to do more than pay lip service to affordable housing for low-wage workers? We don't start with softballs. We go right in.
Yeah. I love the first part of that question. How do we get elected officials to pay anything other than lip service? You could just stop there, right? And then fill it in with anything. And by the way, I don't mind if people want to, turn on their video and we can see each other as well. That's totally fine with me. It's funny, we were just talking when I was in Goldsboro at this 1.5-day retreat, we were just talking about affordable housing and how critical that is. And it's weird, you say affordable housing and it's almost like pejorative. Like people get this idea, oh, not in my backyard, I don't want affordable housing. But do you really know what affordable housing is? There are some towns here in North Carolina that have taken these small historic homes and made them gorgeous, just beautiful. Anyone would want to live in there, and they actually add value to the town. I think that the answer is with any legislator, until their own constituents are, basically bringing their phone off the hook, they're not going to care. Unfortunately, it's all about getting reelected, and you get reelected by your constituents in your town. And I hate to be that cynical, but I think we watch that on every single level. Every single level. You see a legislator at the state level or the federal level or the local level say, yeah, this is what I think, and I'm going to take the hard path here. And then the minute somebody, with a louder voice says, I don't like that, and I'm not going to vote for you, then they flip the script. So I don't think people will pay more than lip service to any issue until it is right in front of their face and directly affecting them.
Thank you. Rebecca had a next question, and it was asking if you're familiar with Down Home, North Carolina. I think she posted that when we were talking some about the rural and small towns.
Mm-hmm.
So and I certainly don't want to put words in Rebecca's mouth, so I hope she'll chime in here, but I think it's a group that works with those communities.
Is that the one out of the governor's office? Because there was one that was launched out of the governor's office, but if it's not that one, then no, I'm not familiar with it, but I feel like I should be. And I appreciate you bringing that to my attention, Rebecca.
Yeah, look it up. I don't think it's out of the governor's office. I'm not sure how I ended up on their email list since I live in Raleigh, which is not very rural.
Yeah.
But they are a group that is attempting to bring rural areas of the state, some of which are definitely small towns, together to sort of develop some political clout around issues that affect rural North Carolina, which a lot of them then also affect urban North Carolina. So I think it's a group worth trying to hook up with.
Absolutely.
I think they are somehow loosely affiliated with the North Carolina Justice Center.
Okay, good to know. And our lobbyists may be very much aware of them, or the woman on my staff that does all of our economic development might.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, you got me, and I know a little about a lot, but not a lot about a little. So,
Right.
thank you. And I appreciate it.
Great. Our next question is from one of the Cheryl Keaton. How
Okay.
learn what the roles of elected officials are?
Sure. You can take our course. We have a lot of, well, you know, I actually think that the easiest way is I have a couple of great slides that sets that out, because we do teach that. We do teach the roles and responsibilities of local elected officials. In fact, I'm working right now on our on-demand series that tells you exactly, you're a mayor. Are you a mayor in a mayor council form of government, or are you a mayor in a council manager form of government? Because, you know, there's two different kinds, and your roles and responsibilities are very different. And we set that all out. So, you know, I'm sure I'm sure there are places to Google it and figure that out, but that's exactly what we teach. And in fact, we're teaching it 3 ways this year. I've partnered with the School of Government. We're going to do the Essentials of Municipal Government class in person. There's going to be a webinar. So there will be a webinar about all that. And then, like I said, there will be the on-demand module, which will be very inexpensive, very accessible, coming out of the league. But if you just need a few slides, I'm happy to send them to you.
Well, you gave us 2 answers in one there, because there were some questions later on about if some of your trainings were available to citizens or only folks in the municipality. So thank you for that. Is your website the easiest way for folks to find those?
I think so. It's called Advancing Municipal Leaders, and we do have some on-demand content there that anybody can take it. We don't limit it to members, but it's called Advancing Municipal Leaders. But what I can do is I can follow up with you, and I can send you the link. And I will tell you that the actual elected leader content should be ready in January, which will be great. But yeah, we don't limit it to just our members. Anybody can take it. And then the School of Government has some interesting courses as well. They tend to be, see, we have such a diversity in membership that we try to keep our pricing really, really low so everybody can access it. And we don't have a way to scholarship people, so we really want them. We try to keep our pricing low. So some of the other entities that are really good, like Western Carolina is really good at it, and UNC School of Government is really good at it, but sometimes those prices tend to be a little bit higher. And I don't know if they have restrictions on who can take it. But I can send you access to it's called Advancing Municipal Leaders. And if you go to our website, you will actually see any webinars that are coming up, and you're free to participate in those too.
That's wonderful. Sounds like that's great information. Next, there's a couple of questions throughout here related to the General Assembly. So this first one is, it amazes me how much the state General Assembly can insert themselves into city county governments. Is this peculiar to North Carolina, or is it common in other states?
It is common in other states. You are constantly going to get that, I guess, power struggle is the right way to put it. You know, the states hold all the money. The local municipalities want the money. And so there's going to be just this natural push and pull no matter what. I think we're seeing this play out. Okay, look at Texas. It's happening right there. California. There's a constant back and forth. You know, the city or county does this, and then the state says this, and then you have to go to court and you have to figure out, you know, who's really got jurisdiction over that particular issue. So it is common.
And sort of in the vein of the General Assembly, have your lobbyists seen the communication with the General Assembly become more challenging? And assuming yes, are there any strategies to help improve that?
Wow. Oh, so challenging. I'm delighted I am not a lobbyist anymore, and I have great respect for the people on our team that are. Just as a for instance, the General Assembly, much of it was still open in 2020, and our people were going down there and having conversations. And if you went to talk to a Republican, you had to take your mask off, and if you went to talk to a Democrat, you had to put your mask on. So just dealing with that. And we're nonpartisan. We're representing, we're like, hey, we don't want billboards on the freeway. That's what we're talking about, right? We're not talking about anything else. We're like, hey, you know, we want to be able to do broadband, you know, in our city and town. This should not be controversial stuff.
Right.
But yes, so much of it really got politicized. And you know, again, I hate giving this answer. You know, I'm a lawyer, and I know lawyers always give this answer, but it depends. It depends on the topic you're talking about. There are some things you're going to talk to a legislator about that is always going to be controversial, and it's not going to matter. It's just always going to be controversial. I think that the strategies are maybe to spend a little bit more time up front relationship building. This must be hard for you. What's happening in your town? How are you experiencing this? And if you know you're going to go speak to someone that may not be aligned with you, lean into that. And you know, understand that there are some conflicting views there, but that's okay. And just come in and say, maybe make light. Hey, okay, you're going to love seeing me today, because I've got something I know you've been dying to talk about, you know, easing restrictions on voter registration. I know you're going to love talking about mail-in votes for everybody. I know you're going to love that. So here I am to talk about this. And so you've called it out, you've opened it up. And then after you've leaned into that conflict and you've created the opening, pretend you don't know anything. Put your stance away and say, so talk to me about your views on that. How do you feel about that? And why do you feel that way? And then resist telling them why they're wrong. Be quiet. And so just be quiet. And when they finish, you will have all of these different openings to talk to them. Okay, well, I heard him say this. I've got an answer for that. Oh, I heard him say this. I've got an answer for that. I didn't know that. Oh, that's what his problem is? I thought his problem was this. So those are the strategies that I think work well with any legislator. They actually work well with anybody when you're going to have a discussion with somebody that again may not be aligned with you. You go in guns blazing, that's not going to get anywhere. You go in with your whole persona, the way it has been cemented, that's not going to work. So you kind of have to you have to let them talk, and you have to pretend you don't know anything, and then you have to take advantage of that. And that's what our people have been doing. And they've been doing a lot of meditation. I'm not going to lie. A lot of deep breathing, a lot of meditation.
That's an impressive skill set. I used to be the one that always got in trouble in school for talking too much. So I don't think that would play to my strength. So good on them for being able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good it takes a while, but it's a good practice, and you'll be, because you know what, you want to win, you want your outcome, And
Mhm.
that's what you have to keep in your head. Do I want to be right, or do I want to
Wow.
get what I want?
Yeah. Yeah, great advice. We, moving on, we have a couple of questions around the smaller cities that you mentioned. So with the majority of cities being small and services being harder to access, how do these small rural cities or areas reconcile voting for state leaders who don't seem interested in services more available? For example, healthcare, broadband services.
Yeah. I'd like to see the voter participation statistics in some of those places.
Mm.
I bet their turnout's not great. Again, you know, the story is you have to have a dog in the fight, right? You have to have something that actually affects you. So I think a lot of these smaller communities feel probably feel pretty left out, and instead of wanting to do something proactive about it, they just continue to feel left out, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, let's find something a little more uplifting, right? So a couple of more questions that are a little bit related. One, how many cities and towns are taking advantage of the direct program, and what's their response to that been?
Yeah. Okay. So the answer is not enough. But we just got it off the ground. So we just deployed it in July, and this is the situation where timing is everything. Just as we got all excited about deploying direct, the ARP money, started coming through. So now everyone's caught up with ARP because they need to get their money, right? You've got to do the paperwork, you got to get your money. So it was very hard to talk to them about racial equity and inclusion while they're trying to figure out how to get their money. And if I could have said, you can use that money for my program, I think it would have been like, a lemonade stand. But that wasn't the case. So we are now getting more traction. But I can tell you the reason we did it was twofold. One, we do put forward programs and services that our members want, right? We listen to them and we put that out there. But sometimes it's our job to be futurists and to see what's coming down, right? And when George Floyd and all of that started manifesting, we were like, we have to take a stand here. We cannot be silent. We represent 538 municipalities. They all have problems, right? There are racial equity problems in all 538 cities and towns that we represent. And they might be different problems, but they are there. So we had to take a position. And our membership agreed with that, and they liked that. And our board got behind it. And, we took a staff member and devoted her to this. So the support was there. The buy-in has been an uphill climb. And but now we're going to get really targeted, and we know exactly who it is we want to call. And I think that once we get 10 or 12 of the, get through like 10 or 12 of these, then I think it'll be a much easier, it will be more easily accepted by the cities and towns. I think a lot of them, and this is interesting. I was talking to Bill Harris out of Fuquay Varina. I don't know if anyone here is from Fuquay, but wonderful man, great commissioner. And he was on this task force to help create this program. And he said he also feels that all the noise around critical race theory did not help, because we're coming in super data driven, super rational, super, this is the history, right? And then there's all these conversations about critical race theory that are happening at a very, very high level. And a lot of elected officials are afraid of that. They don't want anything that's being played at that decibel, right? It doesn't matter if it's about race. It could be about housing, right? It could be about education. It could be about street lamps. They don't want anything that's being played at that high of a level. So we have to do a really good job or a better job at saying, this is exactly what we're doing. So it was I think it's a bit of a timing issue, but I think that the program will have some very good adoption. Thank you for that question. It's near and dear. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, sort of relatedly, someone else asked, how can we find out what training has been provided to our county leaders? So I think there's just real interest in knowing how engaged the leaders are.
Yeah, so we don't track education for county leaders, but we do track it. We can track it for city leaders. I believe in our CRM database, we know who has signed up for what. So it, unfortunately, I don't have the transparency, capabilities to say, oh, just log into the league and find out what your people have taken. But we do have that data. And a lot, I think you'd be very surprised. Most elected officials want to learn something. These essentials and municipal government classes, we've been doing these for years and years and years and years, and you'll get 100, 200, 300, 400 people in a room. Our leverage NC, our economic development, I think we've had 2,500 people go through these courses. So they're looking for opportunities. And you know who your best friend is in getting your elected official educated is your town or city clerk. They are the ones that always push the electeds to take these trainings, which is not something I knew. And you also need to know, the other thing you need to know is every elected official is required to take ethics training every year. So they all have to take that. We offer it, the School of Government offers it, but they all have to take ethics training every year.
I've learned many things, including that. Kristen asked,
all night and I could tell you all kinds of stories, but I know this is being recorded and I know it's going to be streamed, but I can tell you lots of good, they're very good stories about what people want to do and how they want to be better leaders. And I was just talking to a newly elected in Goldsboro, he was so enthusiastic. He was so happy to be elected. He was so happy to have this job, and he was young and enthusiastic and visionary. And I'm seeing so much more of that. It's inspiring.
Yeah, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Kristen asked, you mentioned research, but she missed the slide that talked about what research you do. So do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. Let me just try to see what was back on that. We have 3 people that do a lot of different research for us, and it's mainly things that will help our cities and towns. So we do a salary and benefits survey so that they can see, what do town managers make? What do city attorneys make? What do, police make? We do financial projections, to help them with their budget development. We can do we're doing with ARP, we did a lot of research on, the population size and how much money everybody was getting. So it really, really just depends. They're both very talented, and it doesn't matter what I ask them, they seem to come up with something. But the salary and benefits survey is something that towns, they cannot wait for that to come out every year.
Great. Next question, does the league have a strategy to pursue the passage of authority for municipalities to require mandatory inclusionary zoning in North Carolina? And that is from Robin.
Robin, I don't know. I can ask that question of one of our lobbyists, but I honestly do not know. But I would be happy to find out if we have a strategy. Inclusionary. I'm
muting because my dog is right next to me, apparently getting antsy. So apologies if you hear a stray bark. Cheryl had a question regarding the redistricting. Are you finding a lot of cities and towns asking for help with redistricting? What are they most concerned about with the process?
Yeah, they have not been asking us for help with redistricting. I believe that there's probably a whole cadre of consultants out there trying to assist with that. And even if they did ask us, we would not get involved in that. So it's interesting that, given all the time we spent down at the legislature earlier in the year working on this and working on 722, you'd think people would be asking, but it honestly has not. It has not been a recurring question.
This question was probably posed while we were talking about getting the information from which elected officials have taken the different courses.
Yeah.
It's, could you respond to a League of Women Voters request for info on which elected officials in towns in Wake County have taken courses and which courses?
We are not a public agency, so we don't do public records requests. So I think that that's a question that I would have to defer to our legal department, and I'm not trying to be coy. I don't think it's, but I can't. We don't, I guess I said we don't do public records requests. So.
And as of right now, this is the final question, and we do have a few more minutes. So if anybody has anything burning that they wanted to ask, speak now. But this question is, did you provide any assistance in City of Raleigh salary research that they've recently released? Were you guys aware of that?
Yeah, we didn't provide anything to them directly, but I would be shocked if they didn't use our salary and benefit surveys in conjunction with whatever else that they did.
That sounds great.
Mhm.
Well, no one else has posed any questions. Is there anything else you would like to share, Jennifer? I will say that there were quite a few people who were impressed to hear that the city clerk is a proponent of training. That I was not the one who seemed to have learned that new fact today.
Yeah, no, it's great. I just want to make sure I have my homework, which is I'm going to get some slides on municipal roles over to you, and I'm going to get an answer on whether the league has a strategy for mandatory inclusionary zoning. And I will also put an AML link together. Rebecca, did you have something? You're muted.
You're muted, Rebecca.
Sorry, I put in a question that I think got missed toward the end about if the League of Women Voters requested information about which elected officials of cities and towns in Wake County had taken classes and which classes they had taken, would you be able to respond to that?
Mm-hmm. Actually, we just addressed that. And I said, we're not a public records agency, so we don't respond to public records requests.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I missed that. My dog was throwing up.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. That sounds terrible. I have 2 dogs too, so I feel your pain.
All right.
Well, fellow leaguers, I really appreciate this. And Cheryl Tung, thank you for inviting me, and good luck with your panel. You have a big night.
Yeah, we do. And I really appreciate you coming. I think we all had a lot of questions, and I think that this was very helpful in just knowing what your league does and what the similarities are with our league. And certainly I think there's a lot of interest in the training that you're providing. So I think that you'll hear from us. I did look on your website, and there's quite a bit there. Some of it looked like you might need to log in. So we might have some follow-up questions on how to access some of that.
Yeah, you have to create, we're on a platform called Path. That's our learning management system. So you have to create a Path ID. And then once you have that, you can go in and you can purchase classes, and then there are free classes and that sort of thing. So there you would need instructions on how to register for that. But again, let me, here, this is what I'm going to do. This is my email, but Heather will have this. And
I think it's interesting that we all agree that it's been challenging to work with state lawmakers, and it's just kind of interesting to hear that that is not unique to the league. It is unique to a lot of organizations, even though we're all nonpartisan. So that was, I think that your tips for communicating with them were helpful. Sometimes we tend to want to go in there and just tell them all these things on our sheets, and that's not always productive. So I think, that's one of the things we all need to do better is listen. There's this quote today that was just on a friend's Facebook about listening to understand versus listening to reply.
And I will tell you, know something about them when you walk in, hey, I saw in the paper that, you just got best hometown and this and that, or I just saw that, your city manager just got fired. Wow, that's kind of stressful.
Yes.
You've got to give them a reason to remember you. And you also have to give them a reason to look at you differently from the next person that's coming in, right?
Right.
So I know you don't get, here's my biggest tip. Your best friend is the legislative assistant.
Yes.
You probably all know that, but that is your best friend. If you can get a relationship with them, that's how you get to
Half
that
the battle.
Yeah. So
Well,
I'm sure you all know all of this. So
no, I think we always are looking for more tips. And in fact, I think we've just kind of stepped back from doing a lot of that recently, just, because it's, we go down there and we spend hours and it's not always fruitful. And it's kind of like, we are all volunteers. And so I think sometimes we just need to kind of step back, take a little breath, and then reevaluate, find new strategies. So this was very helpful. And I do think, it is everybody, I think all legislatures like to hear about something that they've done that you appreciate. So doing your research is very important. And we try to look for like legislation that we would have supported or thought was great or anything like that. But super helpful for all the information you've provided us tonight. So we are very grateful that you have come. And I know that you're traveling and doing other things right now, as am I. So we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us tonight.
Well, I really appreciated this as well. And thank you all for having me. And I wish you all the best of luck. And I will follow up on my homework and get all that information back to Cheryl. And to
Thank
Heather,
you, Jennifer. Thank you so much.
evening. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.